There's a question that people raise about the boycott movement. Wouldn't boycott also affect people who are innocent and who have nothing to do with Israel's policies and crimes? Wouldn't it be wrong to have a comprehensive boycott on all of Israel as a result? And also, wouldn't Palestinians also be affected by the boycott? After all, the Palestinian economy is so strongly dependent on the Israeli economy that any kind of international boycott on Israel, of course, affects the Palestinians as well. First of all, we have to clarify that if the Palestinians are the ones making the call, and if there is such a widespread support for boycott amongst Palestinians, both in the occupied territories and inside Israel, they're, of course, quite aware that boycott affects them as well. They know that they're paying a price for their call for boycott, and yet they're making the call anyway. Then it would be patronizing, even a kind of colonialist argument to say, we know better than you what is good for you, and you don't understand that a boycott will hurt you. Of course, they do understand, and they still call for boycott. But also, we have to understand that the boycott is not an embargo. There is a big difference between a boycott and an embargo. An embargo, such as the one applied by the United States against Iraq before the second invasion of Iraq, or the embargo on Cuba or on Libya, is an attempt to completely strangle an economy, not allowing people in that area to buy what they need. The call for boycott doesn't call on Israel to make it impossible to buy things. Israelis are still able to import everything except weapons, of course. But it makes it difficult for Israeli companies to export their products and therefore make profit by exploiting the Palestinian economy. So there's a difference between a boycott and an embargo. Second, the Israeli society is very divided. It's one of the most unequal societies in the world. In fact, even if you don't include the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories, Israel is the most unequal country in the developed world, with the exception of the United States. But if you do include the Palestinians in the occupied territories, then you have a country with 11 million people, which includes the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Israel, under one government, one form of control, and that is the most unequal country in the world today. So that means that Israel has a lot of poor people who we don't want to affect too strongly with the boycott. We don't want these people to suffer because of what their government is doing. And it should be noted that Israel is also part of the fact that Israel is so divided and so unequal is that people who are engrossed in exports and imports are concentrated in the top 10% of the population. In fact, the global part of the Israeli economy is only concentrated in the very top elite of the society, which means that boycott will affect first the people who are already powerful, who are influential within Israeli society, who are able to convince the Israeli government to change its policies, and these are the exact people that we want to target first with the boycott. While the lower classes in Israel, the poor people in Israel, mostly consume locally produced food, locally produced products, and therefore they would be the last to be affected by the international boycott campaign. Lastly, the way that the boycott will affect Israel, as can be expected by analyzing Israel's economy, is that it will force Israel to take immediate action, which means that as soon as the boycott reaches a certain critical mass, we're not going to see something like with South Africa, where Israel will be able to withstand decades of boycott and continue its policies. Israel can be convinced to change its policies within a matter of weeks, maybe days, if the boycott reaches a certain level. And that means, of course, that people in Israel will not have to suffer a long period of time without basic necessities. Although, again, this is not an embargo, and there is no part of the boycott that prevents Israelis from accessing everything they need to live.